and we all have to do our 30 to 40 days a year. Most of the times we do it because we know we have to do it, we know it's necessary, we know it's important. Some of the times we have doubts, we have arguments, but we still do it.
But just how far do you go to make Israel secure? Well, the arguments are always fierce, I can tell you, and not just in the Knesset or around the cabinet table. They take place in the factories, in every Israeli home. There have been demonstrations in the city streets because everyone feels personally involved. If you yourself haven't already served or about to serve in the Lebanon, then you have a son or a brother or a husband or a boyfriend who is here. And after 5 wars in the few years since Israel was created, let me tell you, everyone considers himself an expert on the subject of national security.
There's one thing we don't have any arguments about, that there's nothing like getting back home. Sul Shalom. מוכן לקחת אותי? תודה רבה.
I have also done my service in the Lebanon, and I know for certain how we all feel when we head for home and which memories will remain. Of a once beautiful country torn apart by civil wars, by feuding between rival factions, and by invaders of many colors. The memory which says it all. The children of the Lebanon who have become so oblivious that they no longer pay attention to the paraphernalia of war, to the tanks or to the soldiers, whichever side they belong to. So we are finally back in Israel, the crossing at Rosh Hanikra. In a little over 2 hours, this unit of reservists will be at home with their families in Tel Aviv, clambering out of the uniforms as quickly as possible and back into everyday life. But I have other plans. I'm going to explore the north for a while with a young lady called Anat, who just happens to be waiting for me. No, it's not what you think. It's my daughter. We are in the Upper Galilee, the most northerly district of Israel. And it's hard to imagine, but even in my lifetime, you had to take your life in your hands to cross this land. This is the Hula Plain. Until recently, it was a swamp. And if you escaped the malaria and didn't drown, you'd probably be attacked by bands of robbers. But traders and pilgrims risked this journey because this was the most direct route from the seaports to Damascus, and the pass which took the caravans inland was protected by the mighty crusader fortress of Ka'alat Namrud. The fortress dominates the entire region. It survived through the centuries because, unlike other castles which were stripped of stones to build local villages, this was built so high it was unattainable. Just imagine what it was like building it in the first place.
והנה כפר גלעדי.
הידוע.
הידוע, לידו תל
לידו
חי
תל
עם האריה.
חי.
מתחת למחצבות שם, ודן ודפנה פה מימין.
מה זה היריות?
אנחנו לא לדאוג, זה פשוט אימונים. Anat just asked me what the shots are about. Well, I mean, don't worry, it's just training. So you shouldn't worry and you shouldn't worry, Anat.
Just look what happened to the swampland. It is now rich and fertile, covered with orchards and groves of fruit and acres of fish ponds. The land was reclaimed in a long, hard struggle by pioneers who set up kibbutzim and farms here. We are now approaching an area which means a very great deal to me, though sadly its very name is synonymous with war. It's the Golan Heights, and to many Israelis, these hills were a monstrous shadow over this land. Until quite recently, they were fortified by Syrians who used to fire down onto the Israeli settlements below. I first came to this area as a young soldier in the 50s, and would you believe it, in pursuit of true love.
Well, here's somewhere you've never been before.
That's kibbutz mother used to live on. You said that it was a very dangerous place, didn't you?
Well, it used to be. In those days, it was no man's land, and the kibbutz was actually stuck here without any real protection. And up there on the hill was that Syrian fortress known as the Customs House. Whenever they felt like it, they would fire a shot or two into Gadot, and this is, in fact, how 3 of your mother's best friends were killed. I used to come and visit your mother whenever I could, normally at night after work, and I used to walk from the main road with my gun at the ready. There were wild dogs around the police station, and I was terrified of them. They had the most vicious sound of barking, and I was terrified of them. And I was praying that the wind won't blow the wrong way, because if they smelt me, then they would block my way, and then I really had to fight my way through with everything I could get into my hands, with stones, with curses, with everything. I just asked my daughter how many guys does she know who would do it for their girlfriend. Boy,
Seeing Gadot still sends shivers up my spine. I can hardly believe that the customs house is now a harmless ruin, or that the people who live on the kibbutz dare to wander about in the open at all. But the fact is that the Israeli Defense Forces took the Golan Heights in the war of 1967, and since then things have been a lot more peaceful here. But behind the scenes of tranquility, you find the bunkers are well maintained, and everyone knows the emergency drill. Nobody is that confident. And the Golan Heights are always there as a reminder. And let me remind you, Anat, that one of our most popular songs was devoted to a child at Gadot.
The earth is a planet that circles the sun, and living is better than dying. And all men are brothers, but some wear a gun. My son, are you laughing or crying? An ocean is mighty, a raindrop is small, and singing is better than sighing. And loving is better than building a wall. My son, tell you that life will be sweet. Forget all your hunger and sorrow. But every tomorrow you hear them repeat, tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. They learn how to harness the rivers that flow. They fly where the eagles are flying. There once was a town in the ruins below. My son, are you laughing or crying? And some men are cowards and others are brave. And truth is much better than lying. And flowers are things that they put on your grave. My son, are you laughing or crying? A soldier is made out of muscle and blood. A bullet is quicker and stronger. But muscle and blood built a city from mud. So wait just a little bit longer. The earth is a planet that circles the sun, and living is better than dying. And someone will finish what we have begun. My son, are you laughing or crying? My son, are you laughing or crying? My son, are you laughing or crying?
I'll bet they can't guess where we are. It is the Jordan River. I know that with all the publicity it got over the centuries, one would expect a Mississippi. But believe me, this is the Jordan. I know it's not as big as the other one, but it's beautiful and we love it. And to hundreds of millions around the world, it's the holy river. And to us who live around this area, it's a vital source of life. In the summer, when the thermometer jumps up to the 40s...
That's centigrade.
Centigrade, of course. 42, 43, 44.
In the shade.
In the shade, yeah. You better come out of the shade then and jump into the water. It's the only place to be.
It's always wonderful, after the heat and the barrenness of the Golan Heights, to follow the River Jordan southward and to catch that first glimpse of the vast sparkling lake into which it flows. This is known to millions around the world as the Sea of Galilee. In Hebrew, we call it Kineret.
There's a story as old as the winter is cold, or the maiden as fair as the spring to behold. With the summer's adieu, every autumn anew, she is waiting in faith for her lover so true. By the mountains of Galilee, graceful and tall, there are tears in the eyes of the maiden they call. Kineret, 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 the ripples possess the tides that caress, the glistening waves that inherit illusions of happiness.
The Kineret seems like a miracle in this land which is so hot and parched. It's our main reservoir, and hundreds of miles of pipelines and canals draw off the lake to bring life to the deserts of the south. So, after our drive down from the north, here we are at Tiberias. And, as its name tells you, it was built as a watering hole for Roman emperors. In the winter time, which is now, the climate here, 700 feet below sea level, is just wonderful. It's out of season at the moment, but at weekends, thousands of people drive up here from the big cities for the water sports and the resort atmosphere. Way back in 17 AD, when Tiberias was first built, the place was actually boycotted by Jews because the Romans had desecrated a holy site. Only centuries later was the city declared fit for us to visit. And I'm so glad it was, because we are starving.
Beautiful fish and chips.
Fish and chips, you call it?
Well, that's what they call it in England.
Well, you know what they call it here in the Holy Land. What else but St. Peter's?
Do they?
Yeah, that's the name of the fish. I mean, in Hebrew it's some non.
I could do with another one, you know?
Well, you can have as many as you wanted.
What do you mean?
I'll show you. Look. What? Huh?
Very nice.
As the days turn to years and her thoughts become fears, she awaits and anticipates each sound she hears. Still the seasons will wane as she lingers in vain, and the tears in her eyes turn from mist into rain. By the banks of the Jordan, the teardrops that fall form the sea that is named for the maiden they call Kineret, Kineret, Kineret. The ripples possess the tides that caress the glistening waves that inherit illusions of a
We've had many family holidays here, and while we've loved the swimming and the water skiing and boating and had lots of fun, we, like everyone else I'm sure, are always mindful of a great antiquity, of history all around. For Jews, Tiberias, or as we call it, Tveria, is one of the four holiest places along with Jerusalem, Safed and Hebron. The graves of the grand rabbis are here. But it's also sacred to Arab Druze all over the Middle East because their prophet, Moses' father-in-law, Nabi Shaib, is buried near here. This area is important to Muslims too. Their ancient hero, Saladin, or Salah ad-Din as they would call him, finally defeated the Crusaders on nearby Mount Hittin. Not forgetting the Christians, of course, but I'll come back to the Christians in a minute. There's no way Anat and I can ever take a boat out on the Kineret without singing the song we've known since children.
love this part of the country. In fact, this part of Israel, the Galilee, is sacred to hundreds of millions of Christians around the world. This was the area where Jesus performed his miracles, and Capernaum, just 6 miles north of here, which was the birthplace of St. Peter and the center of Jesus' teachings.
Just a little way beyond Capernaum, but still overlooking the sea, is the Mount of Beatitudes, where Jesus delivered his Sermon on the Mount. Just to the south, we meet up with the River Jordan again. This time, it exits slowly from the Kineret on its way to the Dead Sea. Here is the spot to which pilgrims come by the thousand to be baptized in the holy waters, as was Jesus at the hand of John the Baptist. This is a party of French people, but I have seen most nationalities here, even Japanese Christians. The place is rarely deserted.
And in fact, if you walked 15 miles in this direction, westwards, you would come to Nazareth.
This is the small town where Jesus spent his boyhood and began his preaching. Churches and religious sites dominate the town. And I suppose apart from Bethlehem and Jerusalem, which we'll visit much later, this is the main place that Christian pilgrims head for. Nazareth has not stood still in time. It bustles just as it would have done in Jesus' day. It's still the market town to which the farmers of the lower Galilee bring their produce. So there we have it, just a few of the sights which are held in such reverence that you can almost physically feel it in the atmosphere. And so this part of our journey through the north of Israel is at an end. We began this day amid the images of war which have hung over this land for many centuries. And yet, we have also found this most peaceful of scenes. It's 30 years since I last headed out into the night with the fishermen of Galilee. And this has confirmed a feeling which I have carried with me for all those years. A feeling of timelessness, a feeling of trust that the Sea of Galilee will always provide. And I'm sure I'm not the only one to have felt it. The fishermen have known this not just for 30, but for 300 or even for 3,000 years.
Here I stand with you again, remembering the moments when our friends were by our side, in shadow and in sunlight. All the boats have floated by, and clouds are spread across the sky, and all our friends have gone away, and left me with my thoughts today. For when I close my eyes, I see the way I know things used to be, the stars among the heavens, and the sun upon the sea. We would sing a song at noon, at night we'd serenade the moon. The moments never ended in the years that passed too soon. Sitting on the sand around the firelight, I hear the sound of bells that ring once more in my imagination. As the flames reach ever higher, songs reflected in the fire echo long into the night and almost till the morning light. For when I close my eyes, I see the way I know things used to be. The stars among the